Production theory is the study of production, or the economic process of converting inputs into outputs. Production uses resources to create a good or service that is suitable for use, gift-giving in a gift economy, or exchange in a market economy. This can include manufacturing, construction, storing, shipping, and packaging. Some economists define production broadly as all economic activity other than consumption. They see every commercial activity other than the final purchase as some form of production. Production is a process, and as such it occurs through time and space. Because it is a flow concept, production is measured as a rate of output per period of time. There are three aspects to production processes: the quantity of the good or service produced, the form of the good or service created, the temporal and spatial distribution of the good or service produced. A production process can be defined as any activity that increases the similarity between the pattern of demand for goods and services, and the quantity, form, shape, size, length and distribution of these goods and services available to the marketplace. Production is a process of combining various material inputs and immaterial inputs in order to make something for consumption. It is the act of creating output, a good or service which has value and contributes to the utility of individuals. Economic well-being is created in a production process, meaning all economic activities that aim directly or indirectly to satisfy human needs. The degree to which the needs are satisfied is often accepted as a measure of economic well-being. In production, there are two features which explain increasing economic well-being. They are improving quality-price ratio of commodities and increasing incomes from growing and more efficient market production. The most important forms of production are market production, public production, household production. In order to understand the origin of the economic well-being, we must understand these three production processes. All of them produce commodities which have value and contribute to well-being of individuals. The satisfaction of needs originates from the use of the commodities which it produced. The need satisfaction increases when the quality-price ratio of the commodities improves and more satisfaction is achieved at less cost. Improving the quality-price ratio of commodities is to a producer an essential way to enhance the production performance, but this kind of gains distributed to customers cannot be measured with production data. Economic well-being also increases due to the growth of incomes that are gained from the growing and more efficient market production. Market production is the only one production form which creates and distributes incomes to stakeholders. Public production and household production are financed by the incomes generated in market production. Thus, market production has a double role in creating well-being, i.e., the role of producing developing commodities and the role to creating income. Because of this double role, market production is the primus motor of economic well-being and therefore here under review. Production as a source of economic well-being. In principle, there are two main activities in an economy: production and consumption. Similarly, there are two kinds of actors: producers and consumers. Well-being is made possible by efficient production and by the interaction between producers and consumers. In the interaction, consumers can be identified in two roles, both of which generate well-being. Consumers can be both customers of the producers and suppliers to the producers. The customer's well-being arises from the commodities they are buying, and the supplier's well-being is related to the income they receive as compensation for the production inputs they have delivered to the producers. Stakeholders of production. Stakeholders of production are persons, groups or organizations with an interest in a producing company. Economic well-being originates in efficient production and it is distributed through the interaction between the company's stakeholders. The stakeholders of companies are economic actors which have an economic interest in a company, based on the similarities of their interests. Stakeholders can be classified into three groups in order to differentiate their interests and mutual relations. The three groups are as follows: customers, suppliers, producers. The interests of these stakeholders and their relations to companies are described briefly below. Our purpose is to establish a framework for further analysis. Customers. The customers of a company are typically consumers, other market producers or producers in the public sector. Each of them has their individual production functions. Due to competition, the price-quality ratios of commodities tend to improve, and this brings the benefits of better productivity to customers. Customers get more for less. In households and the public sector, this means that more need satisfaction is achieved at less cost. For this reason, the productivity of customers can increase over time even though their incomes remain unchanged. Suppliers. The suppliers of companies are typically producers of materials, energy, capital, and services. They all have their individual production functions. The changes in prices or qualities of supplied commodities have an effect on both actors' production functions. We come to the conclusion that the production functions of the company and its suppliers are in a state of continuous change. The inputs or resources used in the production process are called factors of production by economists. The inputs are usually grouped into 4 categories. These factors are raw material, labor, services, capital goods, land. In the long run, all of these factors of production can be adjusted by management. The short run, however, is defined as a period in which at least one of the factors of production is fixed. A fixed factor of production is one whose quantity cannot readily be changed. Examples include major pieces of equipment, suitable factory space, and key managerial personnel. A variable factor of production is one whose usage rate can be changed easily. Examples include electrical power consumption, transportation services, and most raw material inputs. In the short run, a firm's scale of operations determines the maximum number of outputs that can be produced. In the long run, there are no scale limitations. Producer community. The incomes are generated for those participating in production, i.e., the labor force, society and owners. These stakeholders are referred to here as producer communities or, in shorter form, as producers. The producer communities have a common interest in maximizing their incomes. These parties that contribute to production receive increased incomes from the growing and developing production. The well-being gained through commodities stems from the price-quality relations of the commodities. Due to competition and development in the market, the price-quality relations of commodities tend to improve over time. Typically, the quality of a commodity goes up and the price goes down over time. This development favorably affects the production functions of customers. Customers get more for less. Consumer customers get more satisfaction at less cost. This type of well-being generation can only partially be calculated from the production data. The situation is presented in this study. The producer community earns income as compensation for the inputs they have delivered to the production. When the production grows and becomes more efficient, the income tends to increase. In production, this brings about an increased ability to pay salaries, taxes and profits. The growth of production and improved productivity generate additional income for the producing community. Similarly, the high income level achieved in the community is a result of the high volume of production and its good performance. This type of well-being generation, as mentioned earlier, can be reliably calculated from the production data. Main processes of a producing company. A producing company can be divided into sub-processes in different ways, yet the following 5 are identified as main processes, each with a logic, objectives, theory and key figures of its own. It is important to examine each of them individually, yet, as a part of the whole, in order to be able to measure and understand them. The main processes of a company are as follows: real process, income distribution process, production process, monetary process, market value process. Production output is created in the real process. Gains of production are distributed in the income distribution process, and these two processes constitute the production process. the production process and its sub-processes. The real process and income distribution process occur simultaneously, and only the production process is identifiable and measurable by the traditional accounting practices. The real process and income distribution process can be identified and measured by extra calculation, and this is why they need to be analyzed separately in order to understand the logic of production and its performance. Real process generates the production output from input, and it can be described by means of the production function. It refers to a series of events in production in which production inputs of different quality and quantity are combined into products of different quality and quantity. Products can be physical goods, immaterial services, and most often combinations of both. The characteristics created into the product by the producer imply surplus value to the consumer, and on the basis of the market price this value is shared by the consumer and the producer in the marketplace. This is the mechanism through which surplus value originates to the consumer and the producer likewise. It is worth noting that surplus values to customers cannot be measured from any production data. Instead, the surplus value to a producer can be measured. It can be expressed both in terms of nominal and real values. The real surplus value to the producer is an outcome of the real process, real income, and measured proportionally it means productivity. The concept, real process, in the meaning quantitative structure of production process was introduced in Finnish management accounting in 1960s. Since then it has been a cornerstone in the Finnish management accounting theory. Income distribution process of the production refers to a series of events in which the unit prices of constant quality products and inputs alter, causing a change in income distribution among those participating in the exchange. The magnitude of the change in income distribution is directly proportionate to the change in prices of the output and inputs and to their quantities. Productivity gains are distributed, for example, to customers as lower product sales prices or to staff as higher income pay. The production process consists of the real process and the income distribution process. A result in a criterion of success of the owner is profitability. The profitability of production is the share of the real process result the owner has been able to keep to himself in the income distribution process. Factors describing the production process are the components of profitability, i.e., returns and costs. They differ from the factors of the real process in that the components of profitability are given at nominal prices, whereas in the real process the factors are at periodically fixed prices. Monetary process refers to events related to financing the business. Market value process refers to a series of events in which investors determine the market value of the company in the investment markets. Production growth and performance. Production growth is often defined as a production increase of an output of a production process. It is usually expressed as a growth percentage depicting growth of the real production output. The real output is the real value of products produced in a production process, and when we subtract the real input from the real output we get the real income. The real output and the real income are generated by the real process of production from the real inputs. The real process can be described by means of the production function. The production function is a graphical or mathematical expression showing the relationship between the inputs used in production and the output achieved. Both graphical and mathematical expressions are presented and demonstrated. The production function is a simple description of the mechanism of income generation in production process. It consists of two components. These components are a change in production input and a change in productivity. The figure illustrates an income generation process. The value T2 represents the growth in output from value T1. Each time of measurement has its own graph of the production function for that time. The output measured at time 2 is greater than the output measured at time 1 for both of the components of growth, an increase of inputs and an increase of productivity. The portion of growth caused by the increase in inputs is shown on line 1 and does not change the relation between inputs and outputs. The portion of growth caused by an increase in productivity is shown on line 2 with a steeper slope. So increased productivity represents greater output per unit of input. The growth of production output does not reveal anything about the performance of the production process. The performance of production measures production's ability to generate income. Because the income from production is generated in the real process, we call it the real income. Similarly, as the production function is an expression of the real process, we could also call it income generated by the production function. The real income generation follows the logic of the production function. Two components can also be distinguished in the income change: the income growth caused by an increase in production input and the income growth caused by an increase in productivity. The income growth caused by increased production volume is determined by moving along the production function graph. The income growth corresponding to a shift of the production function is generated by the increase in productivity. The change of real income so signifies a move from the point 1 to the point 2 on the production function. When we want to maximize the production performance, we have to maximize the income generated by the production function. The sources of productivity growth and production volume growth are explained as follows. Productivity growth is seen as the key economic indicator of innovation. The successful introduction of new products and new or altered processes, organization, structures, systems, and business models generates growth of output that exceeds the growth of inputs. This results in growth in productivity or output per unit of input. Income growth can also take place without innovation through replication of established technologies. With only replication and without innovation, output will increase in proportion to inputs. This is the case of income growth through production volume growth. Jorgensen et al. Give an empiric example. They show that the great preponderance of economic growth in the U.S. since 1947 involves the replication of existing technologies through investment in equipment, structures, and software and expansion of the labor force. Further, they show that innovation accounts for only about 20% of U.S. economic growth. In the case of a single production process, the output is defined as an economic value of products and services produced in the process. When we want to examine an entity of many production processes, we have to sum up the value added created in the single processes. This is done in order to avoid the double accounting of intermediate inputs. Value added is obtained by subtracting the intermediate inputs from the outputs. The most well-known and used measure of value added is the GDP. It is widely used as a measure of the economic growth of nations and industries. Absolute and average income. The production performance can be measured as an average or an absolute income. Expressing performance both in average and absolute quantities is helpful for understanding the welfare effects of production. For measurement of the average production performance, we use the known productivity ratio real output, real input. The absolute income of performance is obtained by subtracting the real input from the real output as follows. Real income equals real output, real input. The growth of the real income is the increase of the economic value which can be distributed between the production stakeholders. With the aid of the production model, we can perform the average and absolute accounting in one calculation. Maximizing production performance requires using the absolute measure, i.e., the real income and its derivatives as a criterion of production performance. The differences between the absolute and average performance measures can be illustrated by the following graph showing marginal and average productivity. The figure is a traditional expression of average productivity and marginal productivity. The maximum for production performance is achieved at the volume where marginal productivity is zero. The maximum for production performance is the maximum of the real incomes. In this illustrative example, the maximum real income is achieved when the production volume is 7.5 units. The maximum average productivity is reached where the production volume is 3.0 units. It is worth noting that the maximum average productivity is not the same as the maximum of real income. Figure above is a somewhat exaggerated depiction because the whole production function is shown. In practice, decisions are made in a limited range of the production functions, but the principle is still the same. The maximum real income is aimed for. An important conclusion can be drawn. When we try to maximize the welfare effects of production, we have to maximize real income formation. Maximizing productivity leads to a suboptimum, i.e., to losses of incomes. A practical example illustrates the case. When a jobless person obtains a job in market production, we may assume it is a low productivity job. As a result, average productivity decreases but the real income per capita increases. Furthermore, the well-being of the society also grows. This example reveals the difficulty to interpret the total productivity change correctly. The combination of volume increase and total productivity decrease leads in this case to the improved performance because we are on the diminishing returns area of the production function. If we are on the part of increasing returns on the production function, the combination of production volume increase and total productivity increase leads to improved production performance. Unfortunately, we do not know in practice on which part of the production function we are. Therefore, a correct interpretation of a performance change is obtained only by measuring the real income change.